Thanks, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Joe Birschbach. I'm Industrial Energy Manager for the Ameren, Illinois program. If you're not otherwise familiar, what we're really going to be talking about here is money. So I know we've got through a few really technical presentations, some really outstanding stuff. This is about the money available for your facilities. And if it's helpful at this point of the day with all these presentations, I can dance a little bit, so just let me know. No, none of that. Okay, so my colleagues here, Rod Rhodes, he's a local regional energy advisor. He meets specifically on site with the facilities. John Bientema is with the marketing department. And together, what we do is we try to support the modernization and efficiency of your facility by allocating cash and technical resources. Before I really get into it too much, I would just say a couple things. This presentation is about 40 slides, a lot of detail. It's intended for distribution, so I won't cover everything, but please don't hesitate to let me know if you have questions or if you want to talk about anything in particular. The second thing, I would just express appreciation to all the other presenters here. This is a kind of, to me, a really high value event. We've, as a utility, we have roughly 250 large manufacturing customers that I focus on as the Industrial Energy Manager. About 60 are food and beverage manufacturing related. And to me, we've got about 100% coverage. Close to 50% have attended these two events. The other 50% will receive all these presentations. And these are great conversation starters and also great resources. I managed a facility in Missouri, an industrial facility, and either these resources that you're seeing here today weren't available, or if they were, we didn't know about them. And so they're all, very, very high quality, and it's a very rare opportunity that I appreciate at the least. These partnerships are key. As you can see up in the state of Illinois map, in green is Ameren, Illinois territory, roughly. I mean, there's co-ops spread out within that territory. ComEd is the other utility required to provide incentives for efficiency along the lines of what we do. They're up there in orange and blue. So you can see we have a very large territory. Just population-wise, it's 1/4. Okay, so I don't know what the geographic spread is, but these partnerships that we have with ISTC, with IMEC, very important to us. Our contractors, our program allies, they're an important part of what we do. The underlying concept is, as some very smart people figured out about 10 years ago, that financially it makes more sense to incentivize a customer base to pursue efficiency than it does to build more power plants. And in terms of base generation, it's been wildly successful. No base generation plants over the last 10 years. According to one group, as a customer base, you guys saved close to $7 billion, which is not chump change by any stretch. Basically what we do is you guys pay in monthly to a common fund, and we reallocate it based on supply and demand to achieve those targets in efficiency, which offsets growth in power demand based on economic growth. That makes sense. It's been wildly effective. Over the last 10 years, the average large customer, such as yourself, has saved close to 9% annual energy usage. That's not peak, that's annual energy usage. That's what cuts down on the base load. On any given year, we get about 50% of our large customers to participate in terms of submitting applications and receiving the cash to make their projects cheaper. To give you an idea, in 2018, we spent about $33 million. We provided $33 million in cash to our large customers, manufacturers, hospitals, educational institutions. And looking ahead, with all the progress we made, we have a solid understanding that there's still a long ways to go. There's still a lot of opportunities. So even our most successful, our most active customers still have a lot of opportunity, and we want to make sure we continue to promote that, get the word out, so that you guys can not only increase your competitiveness within your industry, but also realize the non-utility benefits, non-utility financial benefits in terms of, killing two birds with one stone. You can increase capacity, decrease bottlenecks. You can help provide for better working conditions for your employment. You can reduce labor costs, reportable EH&S type events. So all this stuff goes towards better overall operations, which again dovetails with this event where you talk with IMEC on lean manufacturing and the Sustainability Technology Center on the energy assessments they provide and the different goals they have with their organizations. The biggest component is the cash. Not only do we provide just solutions in general, non-technical solutions, key decision-making solutions, but we provide incentives that I want to make sure you have a rough understanding. So I'm going to spend a lot of time really talking about illustrative examples that are comparable to what you at other facilities such as yours that we've seen, and the incentives themselves we'll go through relatively briefly. But what's important to understand is at your facility, if you're doing any kind of project where there's some kind of efficiency, where you're reducing your energy usage, there's probably cash available for you. So it's important, first and foremost, understand who your regional energy advisor is and be talking with them frequently. Most every project has some cash available. The upside is the really significant savings. We're typically providing 30 to 70% project cost, which is huge. It's amazing. The way this works is you get your cash upon completing your project, basically, and it's directly related to savings in terms of kilowatt hours or therms on an annual usage basis if you're an Ameren, Illinois customer. There's basically two categories of incentives or standard, which are predefined basically by the state of Illinois, and then there's the non-standard, which is anything that's not predefined or any kind of project development cash that will provide you to just implement or execute your project. It's not actually related to the decrease in energy usage. In addition, there's significant bonuses that we hand out from time to time based on doing the projects earlier in the year, getting them completed to help us reach our goals, as well as attending our symposium, our big yearly October symposium, where we have 700-800 customers coming to Crown Plaza in Springfield, listening to a full day's worth of presentations from different groups like this. On the standard application side, we have a few categories. This really represents, again, based on state of Illinois guidance and what we observe, the highest opportunities we typically see with our customer base in terms of energy efficiency, which is why we're incentivizing them. This falls into the lighting category, your HVAC systems, specialty equipment, basically smaller compressed air systems, process steam and steam traps, and variable frequency drives. The big thing on lighting, we provide on a per watt basis, generally 35 to 45 cents per watt reduced. We're seeing a lot of facility-wide conversions to LED anymore at this point. We also are incentivizing lamp removals, occupancy sensors, exit signs, again, all conversions to LED. We make this easier. You can do this online. Instead of submitting an application through our email address, you can do all the calculations online. We also have, if you want to purchase through distributors or qualified, we have a point of sale discount associated with that. So focusing on the illustrated example, to give you an idea, these facility-wide conversions, we have one project where we replaced about 133 300-watt metal halides with close to 155-watt LED bulbs with occupancy sensors, daylight harvesting, wireless, etc. It's about an $86,000 cost for that project, and we provided about $9,000 in incentives. They saved about $9,000 a year, and that is actually, they could have gone under custom and realized even more cash incentives, but that's directly related to the LED reduction. The big thing on lighting is it's not just about the cash we provide, but when you look at the life cycle costs in terms of avoided bulb replacement because they last 2 or 3 times longer, when you look at avoided labor, having to bring in the lifts, having to reduce maintenance time spent on lighting, they can spend it in other areas. It becomes really, hands down, a simple decision for all our customers who look at it. Another example, we at another facility, 500 lighting conversions, about 82 to 100 watt. Replace that throughout their facility with LEDs, about a $120,000 project. We cut them a check for $32,000, and they're saving close to 500,000 kilowatt hours a year, about 30,000. So again, a pretty significant contribution from our part, and on a life cycle basis, very simple decision on their part. The biggest challenge is getting them to the point where they want to evaluate that, bring in the contractor, start looking at quotes, and start providing that to their management to get that decision taken. We also have standard incentives on the heating, venting, air conditioning side. We the big ones are boiler furnace replacement, tune-ups, linkageless boiler controls, demand controlled ventilation. These are all really good opportunities that we're commonly seeing. A couple of illustrative projects to give you an idea. We had one facility come in with AC air conditioning tune-ups for their air handling units, rooftop units, condensing units. There's about 74. We paid close to $50,000 on a $75,000 project, and they ended up saving close to $20,000 a year in reduced annual energy usage. Another example, we had a customer come in looking at high-efficiency tankless water heaters. We paid $1,500 on a $2,600 project, and they're saving close to $1,900 a year. So all these projects, illustrative, these are more successful projects. Of course, the full disclaimer depends on conditions at your facility, certain requirements within the application, but again, just trying to show you the potential that exists. You look, if you go into your facility and you start to parse and look at these different areas, perhaps using, utilizing the expertise STC provides through their E3s, perhaps looking at it when you're looking at the lean manufacturing concepts for IMEC, you start to develop the scope and you start to work with Rod to find out how much of that cash you can recover, and he's motivated to get that done. He's motivated to make sure you get everything and then some, so that we can be properly incentivizing our customers. Looking ahead to specialty equipment, industrial facilities, we're looking at basically small compressed air related improvements, no loss condensate drains, compressed air nozzles, VFDs that control compressor motors are less than 40 horsepower, each with a standard dollars per unit of equipment incentive associated with it is less than $10,000. Doesn't need to be pre-approved. Greater than $10,000, you want to get that application in before you cut that purchase order. Couple of example projects. We had one customer come in with 9 no-loss condensate drains for their compressed air system. We covered about $3,600 out of that $6,000 project. They end up saving about $3,300 per year. We had a 15-horse VFD compressor. Cost about close to $13,000. We paid $1,700, and they're saving $700 a year. You know, not as significant, but again, it's something that makes a lot of sense in terms of controls, big picture with VFDs. But we're adding to that return that you're experiencing and helping you build a case with your management that it makes sense to do that project. Any questions so far? Process steam traps, has big focus on steam trap surveys, replacements, repair. Significant funding in this area. One project, we had 500 high pressure steam traps that they surveyed. We ended up replacing or repairing 200 of them. You know, we covered about $100,000 that $150,000 project. And they're saving close to 1 million therms per year. Very, very large project. Maybe your facilities aren't this large, but hopefully illustrative that, you know, if you have steam systems, you can do something comparable. Another project had 162 high pressure steam traps, end up surveying, end up repairing and replacing 40 of them. You know, we're covering about half of that $15,000 project, saving them close to 81,000 therms per year. Variable frequency drive, another standard incentive, particularly on centrifugal pumps and motors that are processing gases or liquids. A couple of examples here, 35 pumps, air handlers, we're installing VFDs, about 600 horse total. We're covering 75,000 out of that $93,000 project, and they're saving over 1 million kilowatt hours a year. Another project came in for process fan VFDs, 115 horse total. You know, we pay on $1 per horse controlled for VFDs, and we covered over half of that $24,000 project, saving them close to $11,000 per year on their annual energy usage. And when we talk about saving energy, we have a third party that back checks our results. And so it's very highly regulated. So anything that we're stating we're saving, you're actually saving. It's not any smoke and mirrors. We have to make sure we get that right, or we get our, we'll get our hand slapped and we'll get our numbers adjusted for the following year. So those represent the standard type of incentives that you can receive. Then we'll kind of pivot over and look at the non-standard stuff that's not predefined. So we have a custom application. This will apply to any project at your facility that doesn't fall within the standard applications. So if you're going to do something, you have some proprietary equipment, or maybe it's something typically controls related, waste heat recovery, some type of building management system, perhaps insulation, heating and cooling, anything, particularly if it's facility specific, excuse me. Basically, you're just simply with your contractor, these applications are pretty straightforward. You're simply stating the case, providing the calculations on where you'll find your savings. You get that pre-approved before you cut a purchase order. You'll recover up to 12 cents per kilowatt hour saved. Up to with a $500,000 cap, which may be exceeded in specific cases. In addition, you're looking at new construction. We'll pay on lighting for your LED installs, basically not as much as what you find in standard lighting conversions because you're not saving as much compared to what you can find in the market, but still a very significant contribution if you have new projects. My personal favorite are the retro-commissioning incentives. These retro-commissioning incentives are for performance studies of specific process systems within your facility. As an example, the compressed air, you bring in one of the contractors we're familiar with, or that maybe your contractor of choice that we can train ahead of time to become familiar with our program. And what they'll do is they'll go in and we'll cover 80%, right? 80% of the cost to provide a performance audit of that entire system, a very comprehensive performance audit. And if they identify any measures that you can deploy or anything you can improve upon that provides less than a 1-year payback, we'll pay up to 2 cents per kilowatt hour saved for those measures. And anything that's greater than 1 year, which is a nice part about these performance studies is they'll look at capital intensive projects to consider for the future. We'll roll those into other cash incentives that we'll provide you as well. These retro commissioning incentives are the only ones that you can actually make money on. So you can actually earn more than what your project costs are. The compressed air is a very popular, very common one. It focuses on leaks, some of the things that Dan mentioned, leaks, tune-ups, pressure reduction, inappropriate uses. We also have a really nice application for industrial refrigeration, looking at lowering your condenser pressure, basically reducing overall work performed on the system, raising suction pressure, looking at evaporator fan controls, compressor sequencing. Typical stuff that it's not very uncommon in your facilities, may get overlooked because facility personnel may not feel comfortable having the expertise because they can be complex, especially on a system-wide basis. And very, very high opportunity for savings. And we see, millions and millions of kilowatt hours, frankly, in aggregate through these programs. We're basically covering the cost for you to figure out what those are. And another nice part about it is you're bringing in that contractor to do a walkthrough ahead of time, so he can really tell you if it's worth your time, and it doesn't cost you anything. They're familiar with our program, and they'll tell you if it's worth your time to even just get that performance audit, which we'll largely cover, and then it comes down to you basically implementing the measures that they recommend for them and yourselves to recover that incentive. We also have a large facility retro-commissioning study for greater 100,000 square foot facilities looking at the HVAC and lighting systems. And again, similar concept, just very, very large HVAC systems over very large space, looking at them as a system, how they interact together, looking at controls upgrades and improving those systems on a whole. So to give you an example of what that looks like, on our compressed air retro-commissioning, we looked at roughly a 500 horsepower total system. Looking at sequencer leak repairs, shutting down one of the compressors because of all the savings resulting from the leak repairs. It was about a $6,500 audit, and they implemented about $27,000 in planned measures. We covered about $5,200 on that audit cost, and we also provided $22,000 performance incentive for the customer actually executing those measures. And they end up saving about $84,000 a year. So it's, again, this may not be replicable, these conditions, but that possibility, that potential exists, particularly if you haven't looked comprehensively at your compressed air system in a while. The same thing on industrial refrigeration, about a $37,000 survey for a 1,000-ton total compressor chiller system. And we cover $26,000 on the study. There's about $55,000 that they spent on the measures. We covered half, $25,000, and ended up saving $88,000 per year. Very successful case. You know, again, the only way to find out if that'll work is to call up that contractor, do a walkthrough, and you know, they'll let you know if this will make a lot of sense for your facility or not. And the same thing on the large facility side. Any questions so far? Yeah.
Joe, let me add one more thing. I was in on starting the industrial refrigeration program. The average for those projects has been over 1 million kilowatt hour savings per project.
Yeah. It's a hidden treasure from our side in terms of efficiency. It's just something that is commonly overlooked, and again, personnel don't typically feel comfortable to get in there and mess with it. They're a little hesitant. It's kind of a corporate engineering thing. But when we bring in the people, bring in the expertise, we have an opportunity to follow up on the E3s. We see a lot of opportunity there. Leak survey repairs, looking at compressed air systems. This will allow us up to once per year. We pay $14 per connected horsepower, up to $20,000 to bring in a contractor, identify the leaks, and provide for those repairs, which this is probably the simplest and most straightforward. You know, we've had facilities, I mean, 350, 400, 500 leaks. It's kind of amazing. You can save, in this case, we had one facility, 350 leaks on roughly 1,000 horsepower system. And they saved, in those 350 leaks, it's about 600,000 kilowatt hours a year, 42,000. We paid $15 on the $45,000 survey and repair. So again, we're taking these projects that might be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and we're knocking them down significantly by contributing to the cost. We have another non-standard application related to meter monitoring. If at your facility you have something in your mind, you talk with a contractor, you'd like to do it, but you can't quite pencil it because you don't have very good numbers, we'll help pay for the cost of your software or your metering that will lead to the projects that lead to savings. It's basically 2 parts. We'll pay a base price up to 25%. Or $10,000, and for installing that metering or that software, and we'll pay another basically 75% up to $20,000 for actually implementing those measures, and then you also for doing those projects, there's additional incentives. So just helping to defer those costs associated with that metering. We had a chiller system. They installed a flow meter. They didn't have one prior to that. Some controls. We covered basically $10,000 out of that $15,000 cost for that metering controls, and end up saving $56,000 a year. We also do feasibility studies if you need some kind of engineering analysis to get your projects moving, to validate a project, to fully define the scope. We'll provide up to $20,000 or 50% of the study cost. So we had a facility come in. They had 40-year-old pumps. There's 13 of them. We looked at right-sizing them for their needs. That's a really huge opportunity is when the original design intention for the equipment in your facility doesn't match current operations, which is very, very common. They did basically a $38,000 study. We covered half, and they ended up identifying improvements where they saved roughly $48,000 a year on energy costs. And for a $580,000 project, we kicked in $202,000 to again reduce those capital costs to right size and update those pumps. A couple more examples. I hope you're still with me. Going through a lot of different non-standard incentives. At your facility, if you feel like you don't have a good handle just on your energy use on a whole, we have an incentive. We'll pay you $15,000 to pull a team together, meet with our energy advisor once a month for 12 months, and work towards getting an energy management program in place that works for you. And then any kind of short-term measures that result from meeting and pursuing this energy management policies and implementing those into your standard procedures, we'll pay up to $15,000 for those short-term measures. Could be as simple as turning off lights in a certain part of your building when nobody is occupying that part, and we'll pay on those kilowatt hours saved. It's a really good opportunity to get a real big picture view of your energy usage, try to break that down into parts, understand where it's going, and then evaluating the efficiency, as well as us helping you bring in, if you don't know which contractors to bring in, or connecting you with the resources like ISTC or IMEC. This has been wildly successful. We've had over 30 customers participate. We've averaged more than 700,000 kilowatt hours annual savings just through the short-term measures. We also have a staffing grant cash incentive. We'll provide your facility up to $80,000 to defray project management or execution costs. That's internal or external project management costs, and that's related to actual energy saved by the projects that person is able to execute. So it's based on actual energy savings, up to 50% of actual energy savings. So you would have to find up to $160,000 per year energy savings to realize that $80,000 staffing grant. You do have roughly 2 years to complete the projects that are associated with that grant. That's we had 53 of those awarded in 2018, and we averaged the average awardee realized about 1.2 million kilowatt hours in energy savings. Again, I kind of alluded to this previously, but it's not just about the cash, which is certainly the most attractive part in working with me, but it's about finding solutions, right? Because there's always, wherever you're at in your operations, in your day-to-day, there's always all kinds of reasons not to participate in our program or not to try to define or execute energy efficiency related projects. We know they're there, right? But from your side, I mean, I meet with all type of industrial manufacturing facility, and I hear every reason, right? So there's no money, but what our solution is to give you money, right? And there's no support for management. Our solution, we have tools to help you gather that support, to help put that in financial terms that's attractive to them. And you might say, we don't have any ideas. Well, that's fine. We have resources, we have contractors, we have relationships with IMEC and ISTC, we have relationships with local universities, regional universities who provide free energy assessments to these facilities. We have relationships with Energy Resources Group who look at waste heat recovery or CHP. We also, some people say, well, I just don't know what the energy use is. We don't collect that information in that detailed level. There's free software out there we can connect you with through the Department of Energy that is real simple to use, that will help you sit down and go through and understand your energy use in a high level of detail, and also free regression modeling tools that help you properly forecast your future energy use. And not only can you properly forecast it, but you can also see the savings when you implement those projects, because you're going to be able to eliminate variable impacts such as weather, changes in labor, staffing, equipment availability, et cetera. So again, in short, it's about the cash and the resources, and hoping we can find as much success with you guys as we have with our other customers. Any questions? Yes.
Do you order HVAC incentives on new construction?
Yes.
Okay.
The HVAC on new construction, most of the time can be handled through the same HVAC application. So it's not very difficult at all.
About new equipment, you want to explain that?
About lighting.
Yeah, so
Lighting on new construction has to go through the new construction application. And it has to be pre-approved.
and in principle, the way that stuff works is if you're replacing a piece of equipment in kind, there's no energy savings assumed, so there's no cash available for that. So when you go to replace equipment and it's higher level efficiency or higher level efficiency than what code allows for, then you're saving efficiency compared to what you would have done otherwise. We provide cash on that. Well, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I appreciate your time.